Let's now put the aggregate demand curve and short-run aggregate supply curve on one single graph. Now, there's only one point in which they intersect, and that's what we call macroeconomic equilibrium in the short run. That's the idea that the level of spending, aggregate demand, and the level of production align. So it's the only point on the graph in which production and spending are equal. It means there's no shortage or surplus that exists in the macro economy. So let's take a look at a force that might happen in the economy that impacts that. So let's take a simple one. Let's say that a recession hits and all of a sudden people's incomes drop significantly. Like during the 2008 mortgage crisis, people lost tons of income through the loss of equity in their homes. So first question is, does the aggregate demand curve shift, or does the short run aggregate supply curve shift when people lose income and spend less? If you said that's a shift in aggregate demand to the left, you're correct. So let's diagram that and take a look at what's happening. So the aggregate demand curve will shift to the left from AD1 to AD2. Now, what'll happen is that at this point, the level of production exceeds the level of spending, right? It makes sense. There are too many cars left on lots unsold, and that causes the overall price level in the economy to contract. And therefore, we end up at a new equilibrium here at point E2. And that's where the new aggregate demand curve intersects the short-run aggregate supply curve, which causes a lower price level in the economy. We experience deflation and a lower level of output. So the economy will eventually realign itself at that same level or at a new equilibrium. But this time it's at a lower level of output, a lower level of employment, and a lower level of prices. Okay, let's take another scenario. Let's erase this one. And let's draw a new set of graphs. So our short-run macroeconomic equilibrium is where the two curves intersect here at point E1. It represents our current price level in the economy and our current level of output. So let's now suppose that the US economy experiences an oil shock. An oil shock is when the price of oil rises. It happened in 1973. It's happened at other periods of time in US economic history. But the prices of oil rise, and because oil is a vital input to the US economy, question is, does that shift the short-run aggregate supply curve or the aggregate demand curve? If you said it shifts the short-run aggregate supply curve, you're correct. In fact, it'll shift it to the left. Because remember, higher costs of production cause a leftward shift of the short-run aggregate supply curve. So initially, the level of demand is going to exceed the level of production in the economy. That'll cause a shortage, right? People will be buying for relatively more scarce goods. That's going to drive up the overall price level in the economy. So we'll reach a new equilibrium at point E2, which is associated with a higher price level and a lower level of output and a higher level of unemployment.